And we are live with absolutely no visitors.
Yeah, but they will come, especially after I finish sending this message to Rags and tweet out the link.
Yeah, I'm just gonna tweet it out myself.
Oh, sorry.
No, not you. Not you. I'm talking to my computer who didn't want to do what I wanted it to do.
All right, so I need to go to my non-incognito tab. Yeah, the thing being is I'm terrified of opening up Twitter in a regular window.
Yeah, I get that.
Hey, I'm subbed to you. Why isn't this showing up?
I don't know. It's like it's not actually. It's live, but it's like it's not deciding to show.
That's weird.
Hang on. Maybe if I public it, why the hell is this privated?
You probably should go in and make that your default setting.
Yeah, public. Oh, private. What?
No, yeah, you should probably go in and make public your default setting.
Yeah, it is my default setting. That's why I'm confused. It's there now. It's like what? Yeah, public. Oh, private. About? What? The only thing I
you should probably go in and make public your default setting.
It is my default setting. That's why I'm confused. Show everybody. It's there now. It's like what?
Yeah,
public.
Oh,
private. What? The only thing
you should probably go in and make public your default setting.
It is my default setting. That's why I'm confused. Show everybody. It's there now. It's like yeah, public. Oh, private. What? The only thing
you should probably go in and make public your default setting.
It is my default setting. That's why I'm confused. Show everybody. It's there now. Yeah, public. Oh, private. What? The only thing
you should probably go in and make public your default setting.
It is my default setting. That's why I'm confused. Show everybody. It's there now.
Yoo-hoo.
Yeah, public. Oh, private. The only thing
you should probably go in and make public your default setting.
It's there now.
Yoo-hoo.
Yeah. And everything is set. All right. Well, I don't know if you have tweeted out. Let's get started.
Yes, I have.
Yes, I have. Well, to the multitudes of viewers in the audience, to my first this Friday in history stream. One day I might actually get around to streaming about something that happened on this Friday in history, but today, because I am a drama whore, I invited Marian to talk about Roman military organizations with specific focus on the Marian reforms, because he had a back and forth with a fellow by the name of Sargon the other day, and I realized...
Yeah, the thing about that is I don't even know why I was paying attention to this Sargon character. I mean, I think he might be a YouTuber. I've never heard of him. So I hope that I gave him a bit of a rub with the back and forth we had.
I felt you got the best out of it. It was obviously someone who's never, done any debating or anything else before. But anyway, this wasn't actually to continue that debate per se. This was more like back when we did the Rome streams back in early spring, we did go past this particular subject, but I really wanted to actually talk about the Roman military, more specific, and particularly the Marian reforms, because they were probably the most, how to put it, revolutionary changes within Roman military history until at least, well, up until that point, probably.
Oh, absolutely.
At the very least.
Yes. Absolutely. Two things. One, you're sharing the Hangout link.
I am what?
Yeah, I can see the Hangout link in the video.
This is okay. Why am I sharing the Hangout link? This makes no sense.
Are you using OBS or XSplit?
I am using OBS, but I still shouldn't have everything on that particular bit of the screen there. Haha. Sure, I put it up correctly, but it should go away very shortly. There we go. Stupid thing. Well, that's what happens when you don't OBS stream for a while. You kind of forget how the setup is placed since last time.
Yeah, the very first time I ever did a XSplit Hangout, I shared the link. Fortunately, my viewers at the time weren't clever enough to figure out that they could just type in the link and, and join the stream.
If we get visitors, it's kick them out and start again, I suppose. Unless they're interesting, you never know.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Roman military has always, part of what fascinates me about Roman military, as we have talked about a couple of times, has always been their will to adapt when necessary.
Oh yeah, that is hands down my favorite thing about the Roman military. Actually, Roman culture in general.
Yes.
A lot of what they had, of what they built, wasn't initially theirs. You could say they appropriated it from various cultures around the Mediterranean. Greeks, Egyptians, of course, Carthaginians, even people in what we now call the Iberian Peninsula, Gaul. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that they may have gotten from Britain, but they probably did.
Good question. Also, Britain was perhaps a bit foreign, a bit far away kind of thing.
Yeah.
In the wrong direction, so to speak.
True. And they didn't even get Britain until after the Marian reforms and after they become an empire and after a lot of, they got it during the Pax Romana, which was their high point.
Yeah. And also, as I said, Britain was really in the wrong direction. By which I mean that, when they got Britain, the balance of power has sort of already, or the interesting parts of the empire for Rome had basically shifted to the eastern Mediterranean by that time. So once Britain was taken over, it wasn't really perhaps there that the great military developments happened, because it was basically somewhat peaceful, except perhaps on the northern boundary until they went home again.
Or hashtag built that wall.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Trajan.
Yeah. Well, the wall was Hadrian, but one cool thing about that wall is they built that wall. This country-spanning wall, given it was in the narrowest point of the country, true, but they built this country-spanning wall in 5 or 6 years.
Yes, basically.
With ancient era technology. It boggles the mind. We could build that Mexico wall in a handful of years, but we have cranes. We have powered cranes. We have trucks. We have, mechanical technology. They did that with ox power and backs. It's an amazing feat of engineering and truly a testimony to not just the Romans, but humanity in general.
Yeah, and not that that's... Hi, Carrot in chat.
Carrot.
Not that this particularly surprised me, by the way, considering the fact that they were able to build, People take them to a certain... aerial achievements, considering how long some of them were and the particular terrain they needed to cross from time to time.
Oh yeah, hundreds of miles, in some cases, with a perfect slope. That slope had to be exactly, 2 or 3 degrees?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, something like that.
someone named Roast Anatomy in the chat is asking, can anyone else hear that echo? I hear no echo.
I have no echo, Rose, but if you have a problem with any of us, let us know which one it is. I can see what we can do about it.
Yes, sir. But all right, so Carlos David says, yeah, there's an echo.
An echo. Where's an echo from? I wonder.
Yeah, if it was XSplit, I would know what it was, but I don't.
Yeah, but even
I don't do OBS.
I don't really know what I would have opened that could give echoes.
Well, if it was XSplit, you would just need to mute your audio preview. Because that was my problem.
Hang on, I just want to know. Maybe this helps. It's a bit. Probably from me. I wouldn't be surprised if it was from my end. Guys, can you let us know if anything has changed, for better or worse?
Carrot says yes, pretty bad echo. He's ignoring it.
Yeah, but
no more echo.
Hey.
All right, beautiful, Carrot. All right. Speaking of which, Carrot, you still have to marry me. And secondly, pardon me. Yeah. Yeah, but Carrot is my waifu or husbando. Yeah. I'm not certain what term would be correct. But anyway, the aqueducts were an amazing thing because, as I said, that perfect decline, over hundreds of miles, and they could not have accomplished this without probably their greatest architectural achievement, the arch.
No, that was, well, yeah, that was the great Roman thing after all.
Yeah, a lot of when we see pictures of the aqueducts in modern day, what you're actually seeing are what's left of the bridges that would bridge these gaps in between mountains or hills or any kind of dip or valley. And they couldn't have done that by building a solid structure. No. By building the arch, they were able to save on construction materials and still have the strength of a full-size wall.
Mm-hmm. It was, well, there's very little to say about that. That just isn't amazing. But let's get to the let's get to the actual meat of the thing, because we could rant about Rome for hours and hours and hours and hours. But
yes.
Let's get to the meat of the thing, which is basically the Marian reforms. Roman. Well, if you want to take it and just give a general overview of why the Romans were in that position, or I could do it when Marius stepped up to the plate, so to speak.
I got you. All right. So for the length of Rome's history, from the kingdom through the Republic, they had a very elitist military. This started off because only the rich landholders could afford the armor, the weapons, the training, and all that stuff, and also afford to leave to go on campaign. But this became more of as Rome's wealth grew and as they become more powerful, and they could afford to train and equip their own army. So this became more of a status symbol. Only the elite could serve in the army. Well, around the time of Marius, he got into a bit of a problem with this because he was running out of rich people to fill the army with. So during his rather unorthodox, unconstitutional 7 consulships, he instituted massive reforms, having standardized training, standardized equipment, everything given to the soldier so that your average common plebeian could join. Me and Sargon's beef was whether or not this was the downfall of the Republic. I disagree. He thinks it was a direct result that led to the fall of the Republic.
Again, I want to say in that particular situation that it was probably to a certain degree a participating reason, but the Republic was in its death spin already. To be perfectly honest, the Republic had basically been in its death spin for about 50 years at this time, if not actually longer.
Oh, absolutely.
just the extra money and the expansion of everything and everything. The Republic was basically dead. What's interesting about the Marian reforms that I constantly wanted to mention to Sargon is that while Sargon and I have similar ideas in many ways on, for instance, the concept of an EU army or anything, what he seems to also forget is that the Marian reforms might have let's give him, which I don't with you, but let's give him for a time that he is right, that the Marian reforms cause the downfall of the Republic. There probably wouldn't have been a fucking Republic for the Marian reform to cause the downfall of, if Marius hadn't re-established the army as a potent fighting force, because the damn Cimbrians would have probably overwhelmed Italy.
This is true. Pardon my stutter, but various foes attacking from various sides, and of course a depleted army. If not for the I'm begging the question here that the Marian reforms caused the downfall of the Republic.
Yeah, like I said, I don't disagree with it. Not in any major. Well, as I said, maybe a participatory situation, but certainly not a. But yeah, beg the question and go on.
Yeah. Here I'm begging the question that the Marian reforms caused the downfall. If not for the Marian reforms, the state would have been destroyed. Now, Sargon begs the question that the Republic was the state and the Empire was a completely different body. It was still Rome. It was just governed differently.
Yeah.
The Marian reforms saved the state. Even if they caused the downfall of their previous hierarchical structure.
They caused the survival of Rome, even if they perhaps didn't cause the... They caused the survival of Rome, even if they were possibly, for the reasons Sargon mentions, part of the downfall of the Republic.
Absolutely.
And that's just... Yeah.
Yeah, that's that. I mean, without it, they wouldn't have been able to fight off their enemies. They wouldn't have been able to, given. All right, so again, begging the question that the Marian reforms were a direct result of the downfall of the Republic. I'm trying to think about how to phrase this. You'll have to give me a second.
Well, let me point something out here.
Yes.
The Romans were at the time, again, there were several enemies here and there, but their primary wars was with the Cimbrians and Teutons and Ambrones, various northern European Germanic tribes that were roaming around Europe, basically causing havoc. If I may, for a second here, go watch the video I did of the Cimbrian Wars. It will give you a decent overview, at least I feel. But the Romans had at this time tried 3 times to stop the Cimbrians or the Teutons from rampaging through basically Roman-controlled areas, and each time they have been obliterated with their armies. 3 consular armies had faced the Cimbrians or their allies and basically been wiped out. In one case, actually close to the last bloody man. So something had to be done. So in that particular sense and fashion, the Marian or some kind of reforms was absolutely necessary.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just military tactics. It was basically expansion of manpower, giving better ideas about tactics and organizations and so on and so forth.
Yes, because when you... this is true to this day. We can actually see, the Marian reforms reflected in our modern militaries across the globe. Standardized equipment, standardized training, because when everybody is on the same page, they can act, think, and behave as a single solitary unit, which is, I am Mr. Independent Thought, mind you. I cherish my independent thought and my individuality, but in terms of a military, that kind of has to go out the window if you want a successful fighting force, because everybody has to think and act on the exact same page, or there will be I don't know what the opposite of cohesion is, but
Well, chaos.
Yeah. I know do English well, but but
I can speak words good.
yes, but there wouldn't be the cohesion you need to execute. In many cases, what have to be very surgical, scalpel-like cuts in their various missions. Without everybody being on the same page, Nazi Germany marches all over Europe, and we can't coordinate our tanks, we can't coordinate our navies. I mean, my point being that cohesion is very important, and
yes,
the Marian reforms are what standardized this throughout the Western world, and was eventually adopted by Eastern powers. And
yeah, I mean, it's true. Hey, Falcon.
Hey, Falcon.
But the point is that the Marian reforms basically took, as Marty said earlier, what the Marian reforms basically took was the old. It's wrong to say that it was, the old elitist army, you can call it that basically, and turned it into a people's army, which basically meant that Rome could expand because it gave the soldiers something to fight for, without them necessarily having to be fairly wealthy landowners.
True.
It involved not just the plebs, because the plebs in Rome are, of course, not all downtrodden and oppressed in every single shape, way, or fashion, but it gave the poorer sections of the populace something to actually fight for, rather than simply just being there, so to speak.
We'll keep in mind that by the time of Caesar and all the various, I guess you could call them warlords.
Probably.
There had already been the social wars and the conflict of the classes. So by this time, they had the tribune of the plebs. They had, the optimatum populares, political parties, which you could view as the liberals and the conservatives through a wide lens.
Somewhat wide, but I get your point. I do get your point, yeah. You could probably more call them Republicans and Democrats as seen in the 19th century.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it.
If we stick to an Americanized version of it. But it's also, of course, worth noticing in Rome that quite a lot of of the great families had both patrician and plebeian branches.
True. Carrot in the chat asks, what is a pleb? A pleb is a non-noble, an average everyday citizen.
Yes.
By the time of the Marian reforms, they had gained a lot more social capital. They could become very, very wealthy landowners, as Roast Anatomy points out. But the patrician, which is the antithesis to a plebeian, was still someone of noble birth who could trace their family back to the days of the kingdom. They served in the Senate and had all that, that special blood, as it were. The plebeian was just your average everyday citizen who couldn't, who didn't have a fancy last name and titles and all sorts of fun stuff.
However, it is worth noticing that when you talk about the plebeians, they were still citizens.
They were still citizens. Now,
I mean, that you have to remember how Rome works, after all, since that's actually quite relevant. Because you got to remember, if there was 1,000 people living in a Roman city, maybe 200 of those would be Roman citizens, and the remaining 800 would be people.
Yeah.
Residents.
For the longest time, it was only people within Rome. Then after that, it was. I'd have to get my books out to remember the names of the people who did it. But then after that, it was allowed to. Anybody within the Italian peninsula was a citizen, and then during the Empire, I think it may have been Commodus.
It was Commodus or Caracalla. I can never remember which one of them did it.
Yeah.
Their
So
names,
many
their
fucking
names are
names.
too goddamn similar.
Yeah. But during the Empire, they expanded it to anybody in the provinces. Now, this was a great move because you could only tax Roman citizens.
Yes.
So there was these huge swaths of land with hundreds of thousands of people living in there that had pockets full of money, and the state was actively not taxing them because they weren't citizens. And then either Caracalla or Commodus said, we need some of that money, though.
Mm-hmm. Falcon Millennials, what's the benefit of being a Roman citizen? Ooh, there were many. Again, you could basically vote in the elections. You had various privileges regarding the legal system and the religious system and, well, just money.
Yeah, and most importantly, being able to serve in the army.
Yeah.
After the Marian reforms, of course, being able to serve in the army. Because if you weren't a Roman citizen before, if you weren't a Roman citizen, all you could ever be is an auxiliary. Which, being an auxiliary, was really, really cool. Because typically they were specialized troops. You find a lot of archers in the auxiliary. A lot of cavalry. Most of their cavalry was almost exclusively auxiliary. But to be a legionnaire, you had to be a Roman citizen.
And no matter how far the Romans got, the heavy infantry was always the heart of the Roman military forces.
Oh yeah. I mean Google Roman soldier. Don't Google Roman legionnaire, or just Google Roman soldier. You will have to sort through so many pictures of legionaries before you get to something that's not a legionary, because that was where the fame was. That was where that sweet armor was. That was where you got all that sweet booty, all those spoils of war.
We have tons of old tombs where people generally just, I am XXX, I was a legionnaire for XXXX. That was what they put on their tombs. And the mere fact that they were putting it on their tombs basically proves how honorable it was considered at the time. And no, the Roman system was not, anyway horribly unfair to compare to whatever else happened.
Now, given you still,
not even close.
Yeah. Now, given you still had to be a patrician, one of the nobles, to hold office or serve in the Senate, and it wasn't until after the Julio-Claudian dynasty that non-nobles could serve or could be emperor. Yeah, and this was actually a really cool thing that Sargon seems to overlook, that without the Marian reforms, without your average citizen being able to climb the ranks of the Roman legion, you wouldn't have gotten common citizens attaining positions of power, and this would not have happened without the Marian reforms. Also, one of the things he likes to say is, after the Marian reforms, the soldiers became exclusively loyal to their general. Do you know how popular assassinations were in Rome, especially with generals and nobles and all that stuff? Do you know how many generals were? The Praetorian Guard is a perfect example. They answered exclusively to the emperor. Nobody gave order, nobody ordered the Praetorians around except for the emperor, and so many emperors were swapped out because of the Praetorian Guard. They were like, you know what, fuck this guy, let's kill him. Fucking Nero, God. Fucking Caligula, and even into the days of the Byzantine Empire, hundreds of years later, Justinian's uncle, who was Emperor Justin, his predecessor was assassinated by his Praetorian Guard.
Yes. So
Justin
just so happened to serve in, by the way.
Yes, exactly. People are rarely exclusively loyal to anyone that does not serve their own interests.
Falcon,
and
downside, I just want to do this. Falcon, downsides of being a citizen, there wasn't any.
No, because Falcon, let's say you were talking to someone from France and they said, I am a Frenchman. I have a feeling you would look them in the eye and say, I'm a fucking American, baby. Is the exact same thing with Rome. It didn't matter where you were from. If you were a Roman citizen, you were, the top of the pecking order as far as, fuck my stutter, but as far as citizenry goes.
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, there wasn't any kind of difference between a local homestead farmer in southern France who had managed to get a citizenship and the consul at any given time. Theoretically, very theoretically. But in just standard sort of privileges based upon their citizenship, they were all the same. So, don't worry, Karen, Americans is the best. I admit it. That's why I want to move there.
We would be happy to have you.
Yeah. I've never denied that. I wouldn't be planning to emigrate if I thought America was shitty. Well,
Sweet.
Well, depends on what part of America you're in, perhaps. I have been to some weird places. All right. Anyway, I'm an American, so fuck you. But anyway, let's get back to the topic at hand. Which, while the Marian reforms did, let's actually. Hey, Mikey.
Mikey?
How you doing, man?
Oh, shit. Biggest Mikey. What's up?
What my point really was, and why I wanted to talk about the Marian reforms, was that it transformed the Roman army into a professional fighting force.
Yeah, before the Marian reforms, you would have to levy your troops. And levy is a very simplified term, which means you would go around finding every single person who could fight at the time, being a landowner who was wealthy enough to afford their own equipment. You would practically send people house to house going, it's time to fight, let's go.
Yeah. Get your spear.
Yep.
Don't forget your armor, and don't forget to pee before we get to the battlefield.
Yep, because I am not turning the cart around to go back to pee. You do it now.
Yeah. That was basically the point, and of course it strongly limited the manpower available. Although, as Hannibal of all people noticed, that shouldn't be said that the Romans didn't have manpower to pick from, just that it did to a certain degree limit the manpower that was available to them. But also by creating this professional fighting force, it created the very long-standing professional legionnaire who didn't just stay in the army for, a little
campaign season.
Yeah, campaign season, and then went home again. This started the whole thing with the, let's serve for 20 years and then get some land. And then we didn't get some land, and then we rebelled and joined Caesar. But that was a minor detail, and had more to do with that than anything, to be perfectly honest. Sulla has a lot to answer for. If nothing else, just being called Sulla.
Sulla,
yeah.
History remembers Sulla as a terrible dude, with good reason. Fucking Jason's in the chat. What's up, Jason?
Oh, man. Hey, Jason.
Yeah, but people do very, very well-deservedly remember Sulla as a bad guy. But without Sulla, there was no Caesar. And not in terms of just the precedence that Sulla set, but also, I did say hi, Mikey. Just in case you didn't hear, hi, Mikey. Yeah.
Oh,
Sulla himself.
Yeah. Tim and Marty is in the hangout.
Yeah.
The last one is basically just me, because that's how I have to set up my my stuff.
Yeah. But yeah. So Sulla actually sent Caesar into exile. He actually almost had Caesar executed. But Caesar, being the crafty gentleman he was, he actually talked himself out of it.
Yeah, he was clever. He was clever, man.
Hey, it's oh,
Archaeonomy.
Archaeonomy. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's been in my comment sections asking about um when are we going to do something like this again? So here you go, Archaeonomy.
He
Archaeonomy.
hangs out a lot with in Carlos streams. That's why I met him, I think. And hang on a second, because I need to shut off Twitter, who keeps beeping at me despite the fact that I thought I turned it off already.
Twitter is addicting.
Twitter is addicting. The problem is not so much that Twitter is addicting. The problem is it keeps beeping at me when I'm trying to talk to other people, and it's distracting as hell, is what it is.
It is very distracting. Like I am currently on Twitter right now.
It's not so much that I don't mind stuff coming in. It's that it keeps beeping in my right ear, and it's really confusing to me. It's like, stop it! I don't want to hear anymore from you right now. I get it. You like me.
Yeah. So back to the Marian reforms. Now, the thing about these arguments Sargon had, and I will be referencing this tit for tat me and Sargon had quite a bit, because, as you said, this is what spurred this to be our topic. Now, one of his points being that because they were no longer loyal to the state, they no longer had stake in the state itself, that they were loyal exclusively to their general, and their general was responsible for paying them.
Yes.
But this was typically done in the form of spoils of war. When you would go into a place, you would basically ransack everything. Houses, temples. Temples were such a popular place to sack, because that's, people like to have their temples adorned with the best shit to impress their gods.
All that sweet gold people got.
Yep. And then of course there were slaves. Not Roman. All right. So a quick backstory, just a real quick one. Roman slavery wasn't what we attribute slavery to today, in regards to the American Civil War era and prior. Roman slavery was typically a temporary thing, and it was done solely to allow conquered peoples to assimilate into Roman society better. They would work a job, usually something like labor or a trade. Of course, sometimes being house slaves, or in certain cases, sex slaves, but they would eventually earn their freedom, was the idea. And in order to work in a Roman society, you had to, of course, be able to speak Latin. So by the time they earn their freedom, they speak Latin, they have themselves skills, and they are perfectly adapted into living that Roman lifestyle. This is how they were able to create a super culture around most of Western Europe, North Africa, and Greece, through this temporary form of slavery.
All right, see you, Mikey. Good to have you, man.
Later, Mikey.
Yeah, that's actually something I've always found interesting. We're always talking about Roman slavery. One day I want to make a video where the slaves came from the word Slavic. The Romans would never call them slaves. They didn't even know about it. Just actually call them, servitors or whatever was relevant at any given time, shape, or fashion. Because it annoys me. That's why I've always liked the term thralls, because that's basically what we use in the North.
Yeah, that is a good term. I primarily heard it used in fantasy settings. A vampire's thrall, a wizard's thrall.
But that is literally the translation of the term we use for unfree labor in old Scandinavia. Thrall, just that's what we use. Don't know particularly why.
Yeah, you people from Denmark and your weird words.
Yeah, I know. We're odd, not like the Romans. But again, Marian Reform Army. It's worth, again, to a certain degree, again, there is the whole thing about, yeah, it's true that the soldiers became more loyal to their generals, but it wasn't as if the troops hadn't been loyal to their generals before. You will never be able to tell me that someone like Cincinnatus or Cincinnatus, or however the Romans would have pronounced him, wouldn't command loyalty from the troops that he had smashed the Vaegians repeatedly. Which wasn't Cincinnatus, which was God, one of the Claudii. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And some of the earlier what really changed was basically that the Roman generals stopped having loyalty towards the Republic, rather than the fact that the soldiers were fighting for them. Because I'll absolutely guarantee you, some of the soldiers would have fought against the sort of established social order even 200 years earlier if some general had decided to do something about it.
Yeah, well, the thing is Rome, the Roman Republic had been set up to fail. This is something I've, back in my school days.
Falcon, please tell me you didn't just ask that question. We're BC here. We're 100 years before the birth of Christ.
Yeah,
that's all I want to say. All I want to say. After that, they held them back that's Byzantium and not relevant right now.
Yeah, but if he's referring to just Eastern peoples of the day, they held them back by having a bigger, scarier army.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, but anyway, shit. What did you say before Falcon got us sidetracked?
What I wanted to say was I got involved in Roman generals. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Yeah. I am right on board. All right. So Rome had set its republic up to fail. Obviously not intentionally, but when you look at how their constitution was, when you look at how their society was, it was effectively set up to fail, because the point being, it was the purest form of a meritocracy. You do great things, you are rewarded with great things. And over the course of the few hundred years of the Republic, you see ever increasing great people. Guy X has to outdo Guy Y, and so on and so forth. You see this progress through the years of people doing increasingly greater things, gaining increasingly greater power, greater wealth, greater fame, all of course concentrated into the man that is Julius Caesar, and to a lesser extent, because of course Caesar had to outdo Marius, but Marius himself. You gain these merits, these positions, this wealth, and you use it to further increase Rome's glory. Yeah, and when you look at a system like that, a system that is built solely on great men doing great things, there's eventually going to be a guy who does such a great job that he is going to believe he can do it better than anybody else. He is going to be the guy who says, you know what, screw you guys, I'm better than you. You're listening to me and only me from now on.
Yeah, absolutely true. And it's, hey, Carlos! And it is, of course, worth noticing that Caesar would probably never have been able to conquer the Gallia, the Gaul provinces, without a Marian-style army. Simply,
because given Romans were conquerors before that point, but they didn't want to be. People tend to forget that Rome was very isolationist throughout most of the first half of the Republic. It wasn't until the Punic Wars that they became the expansionist power they were. They wanted to stay in their, at first they just wanted to stay in their little city, and then Etruria decided to be dicks to them, and they had to, of course, fight off the Etrurian dicks, and then of course they had to kill the Etrurian dicks and take their land, because you don't want another Etruria popping up. Same thing with people in the south, the Samnites, etc. They didn't want anything to do with the Samnites, but the Samnites kept picking fights. So they had to take out the Samnites, and they're like, we just want to just live in peace, guys. Stop fucking with us. Yeah. But then, but then
well, then the Sicilians started, and then the Punics
Sicilians started, which started the First Punic War, and then that led to the Second Punic War. And by the time they hit the Second Punic War, Rome had a ridiculously well-experienced, well-trained, well-funded fighting force solely to stop this insane bastard called Hannibal. And once that war was over, they had this army, and they were sick and tired of people picking fights with them, so they started preemptively striking. And this is what led them to get Carthage, all of southern Spain.
Greece
was
at that time.
Yeah, and they really didn't start off that way, but they were made that way by people constantly picking fights with them.
The Romans were, to a same degree, and again, this might seem strange to a lot of Americans, but I want to draw the early Roman Republic was, to a same degree as the early American Republic, a spectacularly unmilitary people.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
Yeah, most of the fighting done during the War of Independence was done by guys who, volunteer militia and whatever our allies sent, France and Spain. But then, there was the second invasion, the War of 1812. There was the French and Indian Wars. I mean, we kept getting brought into all of these wars. The Spanish-American War. I mean, given we became fairly militarized by that point, but it's just another example of us being pulled into conflicts we didn't want anything to do with, and had to...
Yeah. Basically, the only war America really started on its own was the Mexican one. Okay, no one really invited you into the War of 1812, but based on what the British were doing at sea, it was probably inevitable.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I'm not too familiar with American history, but I can see what you're getting at. The War with Mexico, the Alamo, and all that fun stuff. Yeah,
I'm going to say, and this is a stream for another day because this is Rome. But I'm going to say that the only people like to harp upon the current wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and Vietnam and so on. The only really, really imperialistic, completely unjustified wars the Americans ever fought were the Mexican one. U.S. Grant considered the Civil War divine punishment for America having basically bullied Mexico 20 years prior or 15 years prior. But no, Carlos, we actually started with Roman history. It's just that sometimes you gotta draw parallels.
Yeah. This is the problem with me and Tim. Like, it's 10 minutes to the hour, and we because all right. So me and Tim rarely get people we can just talk history with. So once we start talking about history, it's all like, oh yeah, man, this is just like what happened here, and yeah, let's not forget about that. Hey, oh my god, the fucking Renaissance, dude, the Renaissance. So yeah, so we have a bad
glorious.
We enjoy talking to each other about history, so we tend to bounce around on various topics.
Be really happy we've never been in a situation where me and Marty has actually met face to face, because I do believe there would be a black hole situation kind of there. Just history interest being drawn in.
Yeah, probably people. Woe be to the people who are around us at that point.
Yeah,
we'll need to bring sleeping bags, mats, and pillows.
Jason, one day I'm going to tell an anecdote about one of my family in the Spanish-American War. Well, not actually in the Spanish-American War, but the fact that he fought in every American war from the Spanish-American War until the Second World War. Every single one of them. He wanted to fight in Korea too, but then he was 70 years old and they didn't want him. He was really pissed at that.
But you guys talking about? Just Just put the machine gun on my walker. I got this.
He was always in the quartermaster's corps. He was a cook basically during all these wars in supply services. I just love the fact that he got out of Second World War being 65 or something. I was just like, I want to fight the next one too. I don't know.
But all right. So since we're coming up on 10 to the hour, and you only wanted to go for an hour, the bottom line about the Marian reforms is whether or not they were the direct result of the fall of the Republic, they without a doubt saved the Roman state itself as a political entity. Yes. Given it may have, whether or not it may have been, or whether or not it was the cause of the transition from Republic to Empire, the fact that the Roman state still existed, the fact that there was lands controlled by Romans where people spoke Latin and had amphitheaters and aqueducts and roads,
and the wine,
of course, and the sewers and the protection and whatever else they listed in the life of Brian. God, I gotta watch that movie again.
Yeah, I know. Broad peace. Shut up.
Yeah, but the Marian reforms are probably one of the most important, if not the most important, events to happen in Roman history, whether or not they caused the downfall of the Republic.
If I want to say something there, because it did call the downfall of the Republic, but if I want to say something there, and that was the thing I wanted to have added to that discussion, was the fact that I don't see Sargon's again, this is not going to turn into a let's bash on Sargon when he's running around.
Of course not.
Not that he would ever, pay attention to what I said on one of my streams, but the Roman Empire was not EU as it is today. You can't. My point is that he somehow uses those two as something to use as examples of, and the Roman Empire was not in and of itself a bad thing. Which I mean, it didn't. To be perfectly honest, it didn't contain that many more freedoms than the fucking Republic did. If you really want to go to that particular point.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, say, guys like Nero and Caligula, two really bad dudes, both insane, both power hungry, both believed that they were the only person who mattered, very selfish, terrible people. You know what happened to both those guys? They were executed.
Yep.
Because
Nero sort of committed suicide, but that was.
If he hadn't committed suicide, they would have found him.
Yeah, I was about to say otherwise it would have just been a matter of time.
Yeah, but I mean, he was hiding out in a underground passage, and they would have found him eventually. He was on the run from being executed. And,
what an artist does the world not lose in me.
Yeah, and the same thing with Caligula. He was killed because he was an insane, power-hungry tyrant. And this, of course, was brought over from the Republic because you have to understand that the Empire was still young in these days. They still had a lot of those old Republican ideals. Given by the time of Caligula and all of that, no, there wasn't really anybody alive who remembered the Republic, but those ideals, the concepts of the gravitas and the viritas, they were still ever present in Roman society, which is why when that is the adequate pronunciation of Romani ite domum. Romans go home. It is not Romanes eunt domus.
The people called Romanis.
Romanis go to your houses.
I love that movie so fucking much. All right, since we're about 5 to the hour, and I actually think we covered most of it. Does chat have any questions or anything they want us to very quickly bring up? Because otherwise, I think we are about to finish it off here. This Friday in History Street. Syphilis. Jason, you want us to bring up syphilis? I don't think so. I think the chat is basically just quoting life of Brian at this point, which is a noble, endeavor, but perhaps not one we need to have Roman traps gay. Fuck you, Kurt.
Yes, Roman traps are gay, but they would have been cool with it.
Yeah, probably. But anyway, I think I'm gonna take the stream online now, 5 minutes before time pass. But I think we covered what we needed to cover. So thank you very much for coming, Marty. I'm not gonna shill your channel. If you want to do it, you can do it. But I very much doubt anyone in this particular chat doesn't know about you already. But
yes, please go unsubscribe from me and subscribe to Tim, and tell all your friends to do the same.
I think you can be subscribed to all of us, guys. But anyway, if any of you don't actually know Marty, for some out of incredibly weird reason, I put his channel in the description. So please go check. Anyway, thank you very much for coming, guys. This was very interesting, and I will see you all next week with a new guest, hopefully, possibly Roast, possibly Carlos. We will figure it out depending on the situation. But thank you very much, guys. Thank you all for coming, and I will see you next time.